Crusaders, welcome back to Beyond the Shore, the space for leaders, dreamers, innovators, and world changers. I'm your host, Kels Johnson, and I'm so glad you're here with us. Today, we have an incredible guest that I am amped about chatting with, and that's my friend, David Winston. David Winston is the pastor of Go Hard for Christ Youth Ministries at Living World Christian Center, and the director of Bill Winston Ministries, a worldwide outreach ministry. Both ministries are based in Forest Park, Illinois. In those roles, Pastor David has dedicated himself to planting and advancing the kingdom of God in the hearts of people around the world. Pastor David holds an honorary doctorate in Christian business leadership from United Graduate College and Seminary International. In 2020, he created and launched an online leadership course called the Winston Leadership Institute. He is passionate about teaching and encouraging people of all ages on how to have victory through Jesus Christ in every area of their life. So do me a favor, grab your notepad, get a pen, and take a listen to this gem of a conversation. Well, hey guys, welcome into the podcast. I'm so excited that you all are here. As you already know and probably have heard from the intro, this month, the month of February, Black History Month, I thought it was befitting to not just focus on Black history just as a broad brush topic of conversation, but to really hone in and focus on Black pastors and Black leadership and the importance of the Black church to our culture and how that, freed us and moved us in seasons past. And so as you can see on the screen, I have this handsome gentleman with me, Pastor David Winston, and the crowd goes wild.
What's up, man? I'm glad to be here with you.
Man, I'm glad you are here. Listen, I feel like my life would be so much better off if the Lord would just allow me to figure out who your dentist is, because your smile.
Okay, so true story, right? I have literally never had braces, and I've never had a retainer. I actually only got my first cavity like during my adult years. So I have been phenomenally blessed with good teeth.
Wow.
Yeah.
What in the heavenly host? I've never heard of that in my life. Jesus Christ. Okay,
Hey,
first of all, thank you so much for being on, man. You are a legend and you come from a legendary family, and I'm honored to even have you on the podcast. You have access to some of the top, and the fact that you would come on and be with us here and the Beyond the Shore podcast, man, it is just an honor to have you here, man. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you. It's my honor.
Awesome. So for those who may be living under a rock and may not know who you are, why don't you give us a little bit of an introduction and maybe even tie in some of your backstory to who you are and how you came to be?
Absolutely. Well, you've said it accurately. My name is David Winston, and I've been born to doctors Bill and Veronica Winston. They're my parents, not just spiritually, but naturally. Sometimes you got to clear that up.
You got to clear it up.
We actually came to Chicago back in 1988, and I was just a youngin'. I was a shorty, and my parents, God had moved on their hearts to start a church. And so we started Living Word Church on the west side of Chicago, and actually one of the highest crime areas of Chicago. Started in this little storefront space that was like no bigger than a classroom. And, started with just a handful or two of people. And over the years, as my parents continued to trust and believe God, exercise their faith, God was and is faithful, and continued to expand the ministry and grow the ministry. And we moved to Forest Park, to a different location. Then we moved to a banquet hall in a different location. And then pretty soon, one day, God told my father to buy the Forest Park Plaza, or what we know now as the Forest Park Plaza. Back then, it was the Forest Park Mall. Back in 1998. And God spoke to him, and there was a whole story, a miracle story in that. But long story short, we were able to purchase them all, even despite opposition, and then renovated it, We have tenants that are now there occupying the different store spaces, and they lease that space from us, a couple dozen tenants, and have 33 acres of property. And God has just been so good. And I've been able
Sheesh.
to grow up under faith teaching all my life. And so,
Yeah.
even though we started small, God has greatly multiplied and increased not only our impact but our footprint, not only here in the city but just worldwide. And so I'm so thankful. So I'm a second generation leader. I'm a PK. Come on, PKs unite!
Yeah. Come
And
on.
so hey, I love God, and let me tell you, I didn't grow up wanting to be a pastor. Seeing all of the good things that God was doing through my father, through my parents, I figured God didn't need another Winston preaching the gospel because they were doing it so effectively. And so what happened was I wanted to be a cardiologist. I wanted to be a heart surgeon. I went to Oral Roberts University. And I continued to study biology and health and exercise science. And my senior year, I was already applying to medical schools. God called me into full time ministry. And I decided to yield to the call and stepped into full time ministry with my wife in 2009. And we've led the youth ministry ever since. I'm also the international director of Bill Winston Ministries, and have some other pastoral duties there at Living Word Christian Center in Forest Park, Illinois, right outside of Chicago. And so it's been a great and wild ride. I've learned a lot, and I'm excited to be able to share what I've learned.
Man, that is absolutely incredible. Your father is a legend in the faith, and he has the ability to spark faith in people
Mhm.
like nothing you've ever seen. And a lot of, kind of what we're seeing in the modern culture of like church movements and like the buying up of commercial properties. Like that's nothing new. Like your dad is one of the pioneers to do that. And man, to just come from that kind of a family has to be a blessing and maybe even sometimes a burden because of what people will place on you because of who your dad is. I'm
Yeah,
third generation pastor, so
yeah,
I know it all too well of having the responsibility to carry the family name, but like you,
mhm.
I didn't want to do it. Like
Right.
I swore off pastoring. Even now, my the ministry that I come from, Back to God Revival Holiness Church Incorporated, is it based out of Texas, and my uncle started. He was the apostle of the work, and so I come from an apostolic background, and I spent a lot of time under him, and that apostolic, that apostle in me, I'm consistently suppressing that guy because I'm like, don't, wa- I don't want to do it. In fact, I didn't even want to be a pastor. I
Yeah.
actually wanted to be an R&B singer. Like
Okay, okay.
Chris
Come on,
Chris
Smooth
Brown was my
Kills. Come
target.
on.
Yeah. I was like, I'm after Chris Brown. Don't call me to preach. I don't want to do it. Let me just use my gifts to sing and go make money, and then I'll pay all my tithes to the church, and we'll be fine.
Yeah,
And the Lord proceeded to say, nope, that's not what I want you to do. And I was like, okay, well then I'll just be a worship leader.
yeah,
Let's take the worship leader route.
yeah.
And man, and I was like, the year before I finally said yes, I that was my biggest year in traveling worship ministry. Like
Mm,
I was all over the place.
mm.
And the Lord was like, I want you to do this. And I said, no. And he proceeded to shut everything down. Like no more calls to come sing, no more calls to come lead worship, no more calls to come be a part of this event. Simultaneously, my phone is ringing. You ever thought about being a youth pastor?
Oh!
No, actually, I no, I don't want to do it. And so I understand that, and I get that.
Mm.
Can you give me a little bit of kind of what that weight has been like of carrying your father and your family's legacy the way that you do?
Yeah, yeah. And so, similar to you, Kels, I was in that position where growing up in the church, being a very visible ministry as God was continuing to increase our footprint, people would always ask me, like, hey, are you going to be a pastor? Do you want to be a pastor? Some would even go as far as to prophesy to me. and say, you're going to lead in ministry and stuff, and I would just try to ignore it. I'd be like, please keep your prophecy, you prophet lying. That's not for me. That's not what I want. And and I think, as I look back as an adult, as I've matured in my thinking and grown in the faith, I really believe that most of it was probably based in fear, right? Because as
Ooh.
you're watching all of this happen, you said it perfectly. It's like you're simultaneously being encouraged while also being intimidated. And it's like,
Oh.
how do you live up to something that was legendary in his time, in its time, with their generation? How do you live up to that?
Wow.
And I think that right there just continued to haunt me. And I'd like to tell you that once I went into full-time ministry, that feeling started to alleviate and leave, but it did not. And it actually
Mhm.
carried out in I'd say probably in the first several years of ministry. I continued to kind of bear that feeling, really trying to find my own place and space to
Yeah.
discover my own unique voice so that I could be able
Yeah.
to do something that is significant in whatever way God would want me to do it. And so it's been a challenge, but I think that because of what God has brought me through and how he has taught me and the lessons that he's taught me, I've discovered that there's significance in my voice. There's actually far more
Mm.
significance in my voice and in my unique expression than there is in me trying to duplicate or replicate what someone else has done. Even though, of
Woo!
course, we can always glean from those who have gone before us and the principles and imitate their faith, as even the Bible says. But I've learned
Yeah.
that I have to be me, because the more I suppress being me, the more I actually conceal God's glory, and I actually hinder the purpose and plan of God in my life.
Oh my God. And you set that up so perfectly because for those who don't know, you have a book that is on the way that will be here shortly. And you so graciously forwarded me a copy of this book, and I've been caught up in it. Like the way I read books, I can't just like speed through them because I'm soaking in
Yeah.
not just the information, but the experience. And your book is entitled Authentic, The Confidence to Be Yourself, The Courage to Release Your Greatness. Can you tell me a little bit about this book and kind of what pushed you to put it out and why put it out right now?
Absolutely. So, truth be told, I've actually been working on this book for 7 years.
Wow.
2023 makes the eighth year that it's finally being released. And, maybe,
Wow.
I don't know if that's ironic or coincidence. I know the number seven in Hebrew represents the number of completion. And so,
Yep.
but it took a
And eighth
while, and it actually
represents the
stemmed
number of new
from,
beginning.
yeah, yeah, and transitioning to new beginnings. Right. And so, it was something that was, I think, boiling inside of me. So let's go back to 2015. I taught a teaching series in the youth ministry on purpose, on destiny, and I think it unlocked something inside of me. And that was still at the place where I was 6 years into ministry, and I was still trying to discover my voice. And I always tell young preachers and pastors all the time, it takes time to discover your voice, your flow, who
Yeah.
you are, and what your resonating message is, that thread that goes throughout everything that you do. And as I was kind of going through this process, God was helping me discover my own unique voice. And one day, I was just praying, and I was just kind of frustrated with some things, and I was calling out to God, and God spoke to me, and he said, "You could never do what your father has done." And I said, "Well, thank you very much for verifying that for me. I don't think I could." But what he said
Right.
next to me actually changed my paradigm. And he said, "And your father couldn't do what you've been called to do." And I said, "Okay, but I mean,
Ooh.
he's done so much." And the Holy Spirit began to unpack that for me, helping me to understand that we have been perfectly created for the purpose in which we've been created for. That the
Mm.
personality and the inner workings that we have inside of us are perfectly coupled in tandem to create a symbiotic relationship between our personality, our temperament, our behavior, and our purpose. And so, because I've been
Wow.
created the way I've been created, I've actually been created with the idea in mind that I can already be successful in my purpose by being exactly who God has called me to be. And
Wow.
the more I am myself, the more I discover who he's created me to be in that fullness, then the more
Yeah.
I'll actually find purpose starting to find me. And that's what I've discovered that and God spoke to me something specific, Kels. He said, your highest capacity in life is not going to be preaching. Because I was actually looking at, like you said, preaching opportunities and stage opportunities and this and that. He said, your highest capacity in life is actually going to be leadership, leading people.
Oh,
And then he told me, don't water down my significance.
that
And how many
is
times do we measure our own significance based off what we feel like the accolades of society or culture are?
that's it. That's it. Too all too often. And because we're in this social media selfie saturated society, it's easy to compare. It's easy
Mhm.
to want to copy. It's easy to fall into the ideology that I'm not good enough because I don't have X, Y, and Z. And one of the
Yep.
things you said in the introduction of your book, you said millions of people every day suffer from low self esteem. They wonder, why am I here? Why am I like this? And what could I possibly have to offer? Feelings of inadequacy and inferiority fill their minds even before their first cup of coffee. This happens because people have not discovered the value that they hold. And when I read this, I it made sense to me. And it made
Mhm.
sense to me because I am actively on a journey of understanding my value. And I feel like my value deepens as I get older. I feel like I'm an appreciating asset. And so I
Mhm.
have to continue to figure out how much am I worth right now. But I did have this question. How can people begin the process of discovering the value that they hold? Like, how do people
Mhm.
on a practical level figure out, well, what is my value?
Sure, sure. And that's a great question. And the first thing I would say immediately is the quickest way to devalue anything, whether yourself or something else, the quickest way to devalue something is to compare it to something else. And I would
Mm,
say that the first thing that we have to do whenever we're trying to understand our value and our significance is we have to stop comparing.
wow.
That's immediate first and foremost. And I believe that because we live in a digital social media world, there's so many opportunities to compare. And so
Mhm.
as I kind of go on that journey, the next thing I would say is forget about what you are not, because you can never be someone else. Even on your best day, you can't be someone else. And people
That's
who are
good.
actually really good at being someone else, Kels, are actually paid a lot of money. They are A-list actors because they're good at portraying a different character. But the rest
That's
of us
good.
who may not have that gifting have to settle with just being ourselves every day. Because I make a terrible you and you'll make a pretty bad me, but nobody
Yes,
can
this is
beat
true.
you at being you. And
Wow.
you have to wake up every day with that mindset that nobody can out being me other than me. Like nobody can be a better me than me. And I think that when
Right.
you have that mindset and then you start to chronicle all the different things that you bring to the table. Um, you know, I I I was having this thought the other day, and I'll compare it
Mm,
like this. I was having this thought that I could give you raw materials. Like if I gave you some wood, if I gave you some tools, some nails, some glue, and told you to build a table, you could do one of two things. You could either complain that you don't have glass, you don't have metal, you don't have steel, you don't have technology, or
mhm.
you could build a world class table. And I think a lot of times people are so consumed with what they don't have that they forget
Yeah.
that they have been constructed as God's masterpiece and one of a kind. And as you master who you are, your unique genius starts to flow out of you.
Oof.
I can keep going all day with this, but I think you get the idea.
God, that's good. That's good. One of the things that you say in the book is true value cannot be artificially manufactured. True and lasting value comes from within. So you're never. I think the problem is, and it's kind of what you were talking about, is people are looking at what they are without
Mhm.
when they were built to create from what was already within. And we're trying, when you're looking at what you're without, you're trying to manufacture something that you were not designed to have. God intrinsically designed you to have everything that you needed to do what you were called to do. And there was another part in the book that you started to tap into, and I want to lean into that. In I think it's chapter 4, the peculiar package. There's
Mhm.
a quote, and when I tell you, this quote made me scream. I said, "Oh my God!" Because you were talking about the Mona Lisa,
Mhm.
and you were talking. It said, let me scroll down and find it real quick, uh, because I want to quote it accurately. Because I think this is probably one of the most profound things that I've ever heard. It says, "You are not." Hold on, here it is. There it is. You are not a masterpiece because you're flawless. You're a masterpiece because you're priceless. Unpack that for me, because that is just
Absolutely.
good.
Absolutely. And that actually is one of my favorite parts in the book because, the Mona Lisa is always kind of it's always kind of captured me. It's always intrigued me. And even in writing that chapter, I did some extensive study on the Mona Lisa, and I won't go through all of that historical facts right now. You can read it in the book. But I think the thing that I started to understand about the Mona Lisa, which stemmed from a very simple revelation that God showed me one day, and I don't know, Kels, I don't even know how I ended up here. It just had to be the Holy Spirit. But I was
Yeah.
looking at the Mona Lisa and I saw, wait a minute, the Mona Lisa doesn't have any eyebrows. Like, at least the way that she's painted, like, you can't see
Wow.
any eyebrows on her. Now I know,
Wow.
people might have certain diseases or certain things or conditions in which they don't have hair on their skin, but I don't think that
Right.
that was her case. And as a matter of fact, as we look at beauty as a cultural thing right now, in
Hmm.
2023, eyebrows are a big asset to the face of a woman. They spend a lot of money, they
100%.
get them threaded, plucked,
Right.
tattooed, whatever they do, and so as I was looking at that, I said, wow, somebody looking at that from today's society would say, like, well, that's a miss, that's a flaw. They forgot that, or it takes away from the beauty of the Mona Lisa. And then I hit
Mm.
this revelation. Wait a minute. It doesn't take away from the beauty. Like, the Mona Lisa is one of the most sung about, talked about, written about pieces of art in all of history. Nobody stopped recognizing it just because it might have had what culture might say is a flaw. And then I understood
Wow.
it for what it was. That, wait a minute, we're not flawless as people. We have what we feel like sometimes are flaws or defects, and we're always working to up our game and perfect ourselves. But we're not a masterpiece because we're flawless. Just like the Mona Lisa,
Yeah.
we're a masterpiece because we're priceless. And
That's
Kels, in the
good.
midst of searching out this and understanding this, I understood one major thing: that the fact that the Mona Lisa was painted by Leonardo da Vinci, that actually led to it being a masterpiece, because I found out that something cannot be considered a masterpiece unless the person creating it is considered a master. And that's where I understood, wait a minute, the master himself took time to create
Oh.
us and was so successful in doing so that he stopped creating you after he was done.
Oh my
There's no more.
God.
There's no more Kells in the earth. It's just you. And
Oh
that
my
is
God.
God's signature to say that I perfected the masterpiece.
That that's a mic drop. Like, that's a That's a revelation that not a lot of people get. And in fact, I'm glad we're taking this direction because I feel like um, in order to understand what you're talking about right now, I want you to give us kind of the quick snippet, high level of the story from chapter one. Chapter one is you can only go as far as your worth, and you talk about one of your first experiences in this. Was it a middle school, elementary school?
It was a high school. Yeah.
High school, and just kind of how you saw the importance of value based off of one conversation with a teenager. And I feel like this story will give everybody just the inside glimpse to what you're saying as it relates to value and being priceless.
Sure. It's no secret that here in Chicago, as even some have dubbed one of the murder capitals of the nation, but we have since prayed against that and canceled that. But it's no secret
Yes.
that here over the last several years, even the last decade, we really had some issues with crime, specifically shootings and murders in our inner city Chicago. And Austin has not been exempt from that. Austin is actually has been one of the highest crime areas in Chicago, and the Austin neighborhood is
Wow.
located in the west side of Chicago. And so we had some people in the administration reach out to us and say, "Hey, can you help us? We're really having some challenges in our school. You know, we're in the Austin area that's already a challenged community. Can you come and just do something to encourage or inspire our students?" And they were having a lot of issues that year, and so we prayed and we said, "Absolutely, we're not going to turn down any opportunity to be able to minister to the needs of the young people." And even though it was a public high school, we bring Jesus with us. Jesus is with
Yeah.
us and the Spirit of God is on us. And so we felt like it was our place to go in there and be the light. And so as we went into that high school, we were doing a social emotional learning program. And as we were doing it, it was my week to teach. And then we did some activity time, so it was my week to teach on forgiveness. Long story short, I did the teaching. Some of the kids, they received it well. They decided to forgive and let go of some things. Some other kids did not. I saw one kid particularly just completely checked out. He might have been 15, 16, just kind of completely checked out. And so I went over to him, right? Like a good youth pastor. I said, "Hey,
Yeah.
what's going on? Did anything that I said today resonate with you? Do you have anybody that you need to forgive or just some things that you need to let go of?" And he was like, "Nope, nope." And I could clearly see, he was frustrated. So, long story short, we had this dialogue and he said something that really just got into me. And he said, "Nobody cares about me." He
Mm.
said, "Why should I care about what you're saying?" He said, "My daddy is locked up somewhere. My mom, she's strung out on drugs. I don't see her for
Mm.
days at a time. And when I do, she's usually trying to get something from me. Nobody cares about me. So why should I care about them? They think
Wow.
I'm nothing, and I think I'm nothing. So why does any of this matter?" And that moment really struck me because here's a 16-year-old young man in the Austin neighborhood who says, "I have zero value. Why should I care about anybody else? Why should I even care about myself?" He actually said, and I remember, and this hit me, he said, "I might as well die."
Jesus.
And that's the attitude that a lot of these young kids in these metropolitan cities, I'll speak for Chicago, a lot of these kids in these hard inner city areas, that's the same attitude they have. Like, life
Yeah.
isn't living, I might as well die. Not gonna make it till 21 anyway. And it
Right.
hit me. There's no way that they could value themselves or even value others if they can't value themselves. And they can't value themselves properly if nobody tells them about their value. If nobody helps
Wow.
deliver it or help to rediscover that value inside of them. And certainly
Wow.
not their parents or not their environment, maybe not their school, maybe not their teachers, but we have to start somewhere because think a lot of the areas of our young of our inner city for our young people, a lot of the reasons that we see so much crime and violence is because of a lack of value. When these kids don't value
Hmm.
themselves, they don't value anybody else, and it makes it a lot easier to pull a trigger when they have no value of life.
That's that's weighty. And in the book, you discuss how this moment kind of left you speechless.
Yeah,
Like you didn't really have anything to say to
yeah,
that.
yeah,
Um, and I feel like that moment can change us. Like having to be in that moment can change us. And you kind of talk about it in the book. You realize that, oh, I'm called to reveal the value in people and
yes,
to get them to understand that you were created by the master. Like you said, he stopped when he was done and not because he ran out of anything that he needed for you. You have everything that you need. And I think Chicago oftentimes is just thrown into the mix of statistics.
hmm,
Everybody on a political level is always talking about Chicago. And the murder rate and all of the stuff, and everybody's having political conversations, but nobody's getting down to the heart of the matter, and that's we have a generation that doesn't understand their intrinsic value, and
yeah,
we don't have enough people that are able and available to be the example of what value should look like or self-value should look like. And I think a part of that leads me to uh, the next portion of conversation, and I've kind of gone like outside of our notes, but I feel like it's right in alignment with what I think God wants people to hear in the sequential order is discovering your value. You discover one of the chapters in your book is entitled "Just Be You and Win." Like there are things about you that you can win with. Like if you bank on you, if you bet on you, you can win. And my little brother, I have a younger brother. I'm the middle of seven on my dad's side and the oldest of three on my mom's side.
oh
And
wow,
on my mom's side, yeah, my little brother on my mom's side, he's like 21 now. And he unfortunately, got caught up. He's not in jail or anything. Like he's
hmm,
straightening out now, but his friend choices were just not good. And he would make some of the similar statements like, "Well, what do I have to offer? Like, who
yeah,
am I and what can I do?" And I think the biggest trick of the enemy is to get you to redirect what you're good at for bad usage.
hmm,
Like if you stopped and looked at it, and you talked about this in your book, uh, uh, I think in this chapter talking about when you finally figured out that you were a strategist, your
hmm,
mind was operating like a strategist, and you took that from a negative connotation and didn't really know what that meant. If you take strip back bare bones from the activity of what a lot of these young men are getting themselves to and young women are getting themselves into, and you actually apply that to the corporate world, these kids are geniuses.
absolutely,
Like they
yes,
they are so smart. And it's like, no, 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 no. You don't get what you're doing. You think that you just selling drugs. No, what you actually have the ability to do is present a product and somebody buy it from you.
yep,
What you
that's it,
actually have the capability to do is figure out how to generate income, how
yep,
to build a tribe around you and run a corporate. You're a CEO.
absolutely,
Like like
yes,
that's who you are. But because you don't see anything else outside of what's presented to you, you don't know that you could just be you and win. Can you
yeah.
just give us a little bit of what pushed you to understanding this principle of just being you and winning with who you are?
Sure, absolutely. I know there's all kind of personality tests out there and enneagrams
Yes.
and all different kind of things. And of course, we can go on for a long time about that. Um, but God has made us all special and unique. Whatever the blend is, whatever the Myers Briggs, 4 letters is, we're all a unique blend. And a lot of
Yeah.
times, I think the enemy tries to come and tries to get us to darken our perception on ourselves and the
Ooh.
things that are our unique abilities or just kind of our uniqueness, I'll say. He tries to get us to see it in a negative light. And because we'll be tempted to see it in a negative light, it becomes for us a liability. But something I say in the book is that what I learned is that whatever the enemy is trying to get me to look at as a liability is really simply a lie about my ability. Because as you
Pause.
just said,
Jesus.
we got people
Jesus
slinging
Christ.
drugs who are gifted business people.
Yes.
You have someone like me that maybe because of the way I operate or see things or the questions that come to mind, I could have a tendency to think, oh, maybe I'm just being a negative person. But what I've learned is if we stop short of getting divine understanding and insight into how we were made, we will actually
Whew.
be incomplete in our conclusion. And so what I
Wow.
learned is the person who sees the problem also can see the solution. A
Good
person
God.
who doesn't know a problem exists cannot find the solution because they will not be aware that a solution is needed.
Right. Right.
So
Right.
so I learned that wait a minute, the way I see the world, the way I do things, not that I'm better than anybody else, but my unique genius, it has a place in the world. Not only does it have a place, but and this is what I say in Just Be You and Win, it is something that is wanted and sought after because as I understand who I am and the value that I bring, I will actually allow God to strategically position me in rooms, spaces, and places that require my gift, therefore, further
Woo.
validating my significance.
Wow. That's that's a power packed statement. And for the people that may have the question of, well, how do I trace what this is? There is an analogy that you give in the book, and I want you to give it here about breadcrumbs.
Mhm.
And that analogy was so powerful. Can you give us a little bit of insight as to
Sure.
how can people trace who I am? What am I called to do? How can I figure out that, oh, I'm not just a drug dealer, but I'm actually a hidden CEO and I just
Yeah.
don't know it.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love to make homemade bread, and we have a bread maker, and so sometimes I'd make homemade bread. And for those of you all who like to bake and cook, you can relate. And so as I'll make the bread, it's hot, it's fresh. I'll take it out, I'll slice it, and then we have to pack it up. So you put in the saran wrap or maybe foil or put it in a baggie. And then people might come at different points in the next couple days and just kind of cut off a slice or pull off a piece or something. And a lot of times, my kids, being kids, right, they
Yep.
will cut it off or pull it off and then kind of eat it as they walk all around the kitchen or maybe eat it as
Hmm.
they walk to the table. And a lot of times you'll see some of those crumbs being left, right? And so I
Yeah.
can track exactly where they went in the kitchen by just watching the breadcrumbs and looking at the breadcrumbs. And I'll come in the kitchen and I'll see the breadcrumbs go all the way from the bag of the loaf of the bread all the way to the table and maybe back around. And so what I talk about in that analogy is helping us to understand that our gifting, our ability, and even our purpose, it leaves breadcrumbs. It's actually not a secret. It's not a mystery. A lot of times I think people are looking at purpose as something that's some esoteric, maybe some divine destination that one day I'll arrive at, or maybe some light bulb moment. And for some, maybe it happens that way. But what I actually
Yeah.
like to say is if you lean into who you are and what has already been instilled inside of you, you actually will start to find yourself discovering purpose, just like the breadcrumbs. And so you had mentioned, drug dealers being CEOs, but there's other things that can happen. There can be people who like to work on things, and maybe you discover
Yep.
that you're really good at working on things. Maybe you just have you just have a knack for technology, or you just have a certain way that you are able to communicate ideas to people. Maybe you're a great communicator, or maybe you can plan and do a project or do events. There's just a way you see the world. And I think the breadcrumbs for me is that unique thing that you can do that seems to come easy to you or relatively easy to you that may not come so easy to others. And I didn't start
Wow.
to really discover this, Kel, until like I was married and my wife would start to kind of call out certain things that I would do or behaviors or things I
Yep.
could complete. And she, like a good wife, would say, "You're really good at this." And so
Yep.
here in my ignorance, check out what I would say. I would say, "Really?" True
That's a
story. I would
fact.
say, "Really?" And she would say, "You know that most people can't do this, right?" And so, because I was ignorant of the gifting or maybe the ability that I'm carrying, I wasn't noticing that, wait a minute, this is a gift. This is something that
Yeah.
I didn't give myself. God gave this to me. And there's a way that you see the world. There's a way that you can do things. You can write things or sing things or prepare things, a way you behave and insight towards people. I mean, some people, they might not notice that people always are coming to them for not only advice, but sound insight into their situation. You know what that is?
Ooh.
That's somebody who has a gift for being able to not only listen, but also communicate perspective. Hey, therapists and people who are clinicians, they get paid a lot of money to do just that same thing. And so there's just so many
Wow.
things that we can discover about ourselves that can really lead us on a journey.
Man, you are speaking directly to me right now. I actually just had this conversation a couple weeks ago with a friend of mine who contacted me about a video project that he was doing, and he had gotten it shot, and nobody could pinpoint how to put the thing out because it wasn't
Mhm.
there were some things that went wrong in the shoot that they couldn't reshoot because of the moment, the authenticity of the
Yeah.
moment. They were like, we can't reshoot this, like we can't capture it like this again, but there's some
Mhm.
things that are wrong about this. How can we fix it? And he said he reached out to some of like the industry leaders in like the creative space and film directing and video directing, and none of them could pinpoint how to get it done. And he
Mm.
texted it to me. He's like, Kels, what do you think we should do? Within 2 minutes, I knew what they should do immediately. I was like, oh, here's how you need to present it.
Yeah.
And he was like, that just made so much sense in the world. And it was the most simplistic thing. It was a reference to something that had nothing to do with what they were doing. But it was like, no, it feels like this, it looks like this. This is how you should do it because the people, the public have already seen something in this manner. And he was like, the fact that you were just able to come up with that within 2 minutes and you didn't it didn't require any extra thing from you.
Mhm.
He's like, bro, that is a gift. He's like, what you just did is not normal. Like you don't understand that this is not normal. I'm like, it's not? he's like, he's like, bro, I have access to everybody. And I messaged everybody this exact same link, and nobody said what you said.
Mm.
All of them said, reshoot it, we can't fix it. And you just presented a solution that blew everybody out of the water. And I'm like, oh, okay. My
Kels,
wife,
do you mind if I
go ahead.
expand on that? Because I think
Please
you're
do.
hitting on such an important point that I don't want to just glance over. What you're talking about is your gift being required by the world. It might have come through that specific avenue and request, but there are opportunities that are coming to you that your gift will be required and it will flow effortlessly out of your unique genius. Like it's not something that you
Wow.
have to drum up or try to stir up or get it going or try to prime it. It's just, it flows effortlessly from you. And I'm not saying that it's everybody's plight in life to be famous. That's
Right.
not what I'm saying, but this is Black History Month, so I'll quote the great Dr. Martin Luther King. He said, not everybody can be famous, but everybody can be great because greatness is
Woo.
determined by service. And that's what we're called to do is serve the world with our gift, with our unique ability and genius that God has placed inside of us for the benefit of humanity.
That's a mic drop right there. I think I want to take a pause real quick. We gotta do a shout out to our sponsor really quick. So we'll be right back in this conversation right after these words. Friends, as you know, this is a River Network original, and we are so excited about what's happening here at the Beyond the Shore podcast. But I want to take a moment to give a shout out to one of our podcast sponsors, and that's our friends over at Mind Journal. Now, last week, y'all know I talked about how these journals have changed my entire life, mainly more specifically the check-in notepad. This thing has been a game changer for my creativity and productivity, and I'm excited that they have partnered with us to ensure that every listener of the Beyond the Shore podcast can get a 10% discount off of their entire purchase. So you could literally purchase this entire kit and get a 10% discount. That's the journal, that's the calendar, that's the check-in notepad, and they have some other resources on there as well. So right now, head over to mindjournal.com. Pick anything in the store, and once you get to the checkout, in the discount section, type in River 10 to get your 10% discount. And because of that, we here at the River Network can continue to produce amazing content and continue to share the beauty of the gospel through the lens of humanity. We are so grateful to our partners at Mind Journal, and we're so grateful for you patronizing them so we can continue to do what we do here. Now, let's jump back into this conversation. Okay. So we were talking about understanding your unique design, your unique ability. You said something that your gift is required by the world. And one of the things that I'm as I'm getting older, I am understanding who I am, what I've been created to do, and largely in part because the people around me just keep pointing things out to me, and I'm just like, I didn't even realize it. You were talking about how your wife would be like, "Yo, you do this, like that's crazy." My wife did the exact same thing to me. She's like, "What makes me upset about you is that anything you put your mind to do, you do it and you master it."
Mm.
And here I am like, no, I don't. Actually, I feel like I suck.
Yeah.
I feel like I have too many unfinished things to master. It's like, no, no, no.
Yeah.
You're just a perfectionist. But if you
Mm.
look at it, you master everything that you put your hands to do. I'm self-taught at everything. Self-taught musician,
Wow,
self-taught
that's
singer,
amazing.
self-taught
Wow.
in the like all of my videos I shoot, I light, I edit.
Wow.
I'm a one person show. I do it all.
Yeah.
And
Wow. Amazing.
she's like, that's not normal. People don't do that.
Nope.
That's actually crazy that you can do all of this. And it's when you start to find your flow.
Mhm.
Your flow is oftentimes unnoticed and even unexplainable. Like you
Yeah.
can't necessarily explain what you do. You just can do it.
Yeah.
And we've started our streaming company called the River Network, and that name was birthed out of me. The way I lead worship is there
Mhm.
comes a point in worship where I hit the river and we're just in a flow, and I'm 5 or 6 songs ahead of the band. I can
Yeah.
hear what everybody is doing at the same time, and I'm just in my flow, and we're moving at an accelerated rate, and there's a power that's hit the room. And I think that that's what we're tapping into now, is people understanding the flow that God has given them and that he's
Mm.
downloaded into them, and that comes from knowing who you are authentically. I think this book couldn't come in a better time because we are in a I think this generation is in an identity crisis.
Yes.
And if we don't figure out who we are, we're going to do so much dismantling that we'll be left with nothing.
Yep.
We'll
Yep.
do so much taking apart that we'll be left with nothing. And man, I think you've really tapped into something.
Man. Thank you so much for that, and that's so key. That's so right on what you're talking about finding the flow. Because as you're someone who's self-taught and now has branched out into so many different areas, but you're so right. Finding your flow is that thing that it's almost like that intangible where it's like your gifts meet together with the supernatural power of God. And it feels like there is such a unity externally and internally that you can accelerate towards whatever God has called you to do. But what I've learned is that you can never find the flow if we're thinking of the flow as like a river. You can never find the flow if you fear the water. You have to jump in the water. You got to jump in. Somebody up in this piece got to get wet. Like you got to jump in.
Jeez.
And I think what happens is sometimes we're so cautious or careful that we let fear punk us and talk us into not jumping in the river, not getting in the water.
Wow.
And we're wondering why it's not working. God, what's my purpose? Make this work out. We're praying, we're decreeing, we're trying to go to the conferences, we're trying to read the books. But at the end of the day, none of that can save you if you won't jump in the river. I've learned you just got to
Gosh.
jump in the river if you want to experience the flow.
You I almost threw this whole setup away.
Uh,
You gotta jump in the water. And you can't just put your toe in the water.
yeah.
You gotta jump fully in. And that leads me to my next point in the book. This one got me fired up. This one got me fired up. I'm not gonna lie,
Okay.
because I think this part of the book, it hit me directly in the chest.
Mm,
Like I just said, we've started our own Christian streaming platform
yeah.
and called the River Network. Now, there's legacy media that already exists.
Hmm.
Daystar,
Hmm.
TBN, Word Network, 700 Club. Like
Yep.
it exists. And of course, people's own personal social medias that could just pop off at any given point.
Hmm.
And so for me, I've been battling this thought of like, why am I needed in this space? And why am I needed to create such a company, to be an online distributor, if you will,
Hmm.
of curated Christian content? Why can't I just be a creative and just create content? Why are you
Hmm.
calling me to distribute content? And even the content that I'm creating, like he just won't let me settle on a small vision.
Hmm. Yep.
It can't be small. Everything that I'm thinking about scares me,
Mm.
absolutely petrifies me because of how big it is, because of how massive it is. And I can't even tell people the dreams that God has been showing me about this because it's massive.
Mm.
And this
Yeah.
part of the book just hit me like a freight train, literally titled No Small Thinking Allowed. And you tell the story of this golfer, and I need you to tell the people the story of this golfer so they
Sure.
can understand why this thing hit me the way that it did.
Sure. Absolutely. So there was a Saudi Arabian king, and he loved golf and wanted to have a private golf tournament. And when you're a Saudi Arabia king, you got a lot of money, endless resources at your disposal. You can invite some people, and they're going to show up. And so
Yeah.
he sent word and sent an invitation to one of his favorite golfers in America, and asked this golfer, "Would you please join me for my private golf tournament?" And so The golfer accepted, said, okay, I'll come. The king sent his private jet over to the US to pick up that golfer and come back to his palace. And so for the next week, they hung out. They enjoyed many rounds of golf. They played in the golf tournament, had many laughs and many gourmet meals. And when the week came to an end, it was time for them to part ways. And the golfer was just so appreciative of the opportunity. But the king said, I must give you something. I'd like to give you a gift. And the golfer said, "No, no, no. I don't need anything. This was more than enough. I mean, you sent your private plane. I've stayed in the palace." And the king insisted, and the golfer, he understood protocol. So he said, I don't want to insult the king. So let me just ask for something basic. And so he just blurted out, okay, I'll take a golf club. And the king looked at him and said, golf club? And he said, yeah, golf club. He said, okay, we can do that. And so they said their goodbyes. The golfer got back on the private plane. And when he was in the air, he's going over the Atlantic Ocean. He's thinking about what kind of golf club the king may get him. Now he knows that the king loves to do things real big. And so he's thinking, well, maybe the king will get me some kind of rare ostrich handle on my golf club, or maybe it'll be something that's diamond encrusted, or maybe it'll be a 24 karat golf club, 24 karat gold. And, he was thinking of all these different things that could happen. Well, he got back home and 3, 4 weeks had gone by, and he still hadn't heard anything from the king. There was no packages, there was no texts or anything like that. And so he's starting to think, well, maybe the king forgot about me. And he wasn't mad about it. He knew that the king is busy and he had a great time. He didn't feel like he was owed anything. Well, the next day he got a knock at the door. And he went to the door, and it was an unexpected knock. And he looked through the little hole and opened the door, and there was a well-dressed gentleman. And the gentleman said, "Hey, are you Mr. Such and Such?" And he said, "Yeah, that's me." And he handed him an envelope. And he said, "What's this?" And he said, "Open it. It's for you, sir." And he opened up the envelope and he looked at the pages, and it was the title deed to a 500-acre golf club estate. Now, the moral of this story and the point of the story is the golfer said golf club and he was thinking a 9 iron, but the king heard golf club and he was thinking an entire estate, clubhouses, locker rooms. They said the same exact words, but because the king thinks on a different level, he understood it to mean something totally different. And I believe that's how God does us. God does not think small. People think small. God does not. And the number one thing that hinders people from encountering great things in life is because they can't think it first. We got to think big
God.
in order to see big things happen in our lives. So I'm glad that your dreams intimidate you, Kels. You're on the right path.
Yo, David, when I read that thing shook me to my core
Mm,
because I'm a man of faith, uh, and I move at such an accelerated pace that majority of the time, my faith is within reach.
mhm.
I'm
Okay.
not like wild,
Mhm.
but I move on faith, right?
Yep.
Like I'm not gonna not make a move. This has been the first situation in my life that I felt like I said, God, I want to help to create beautiful content
Mm.
for the kingdom. I don't think that we've actually hit the mark yet as it relates to the type of content that we're putting out as kingdom creatives. And he says, oh, a network.
Ha ha.
Huh? No, 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 no. No, no, you missed what I said. I want to put out cool stuff for Jesus. Oh, a network. Not
Man,
just a network. It's insane the
Yep.
stuff that he's been telling me and showing me, and the numbers that are behind what it's going to take to get this done. And here's how I know it's God. Because there would be times where I even just conceptualize the numbers that it would take to make this thing be what it's going to be, and my spirit man doesn't flinch.
Mm.
And my flesh is like, you know what you just said?
Uh, uh. Yep.
And my spirit man's like, okay.
Mm.
And when I was considering like church planting on my own, average cost of a church plant startup is like $200,000.
Mhm.
And when I would say that considering church plant, I was like, golly, you got to raise $200,000. That's a lot of money. But Jesus, where's 200,000 coming from? Now that he's kind of shifted some things in me, I'm like, this thing could cost 200 million. And my spirit's like, okay, yeah. And I was like, this doesn't make
Yep.
any sense.
Yep.
And
And
go ahead.
no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, no, and I'm just like, how is this possible? Like,
Yeah.
what happens in a person that clicks to just say, this crazy thing that God is showing me can actually happen?
Yeah. It's you kind of have to be out of your mind, honestly. And I say that respectfully. Like you have to divorce your logical thoughts and your preconceived chronological blueprint of how this can and will happen. And I've
Wow.
seen it. I've seen I've lived it. Even when
Wow.
it was time for us to buy the mall. So I'll tell you the quick story of my father. Back before the year 2000, I think around right there in 1998, 1997. And God spoke to my father and said, "Hey, buy that mall," which was the Forest Park Mall. Now it was a mall that was kind of dilapidated, kind of run down, and it was kind of a sinkhole in the city. But it was a 33-acre like mall, like a shopping mall. It wasn't just kind of a little tiny strip mall, like it was a legitimate walk inside stores mall. And
Wow.
my father, he heard God, right? And so, because he heard God, he asked somebody to check up on it. So they checked into it and they said, "Okay, yeah, Pastor, we can buy this little part of the mall right on the east end. We can buy that." And he took it back to God in prayer, and God said, "I didn't tell you to buy some little piece. I told you to buy the mall." And when he tells the story, he'll be the first to say, "I didn't know any preachers who owned malls. I didn't know any churches who owned malls." We're talking about
Wow.
25 years ago, 25 plus years ago. This wasn't
Wow.
happening. And so he took it to God in prayer, and God said, "No, buy the mall." And my dad talks about how he had to grow his faith. He had to grow his inner image to the extent that it could accept the big dream. And so he
Wait, wait,
had to
wait, 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 wait,
meditate.
wait, wait. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. Hold on. You just said something and we can't pass that up. He had to grow his inner image to accept that this is what he was going to do.
Yes. Because your inner image is the gatekeeper. Your inner image, who you think you are, what your self-worth is, your self-perception, as maybe psychologists would call it, that actually dictates and determines how much of your dream can be actualized. Because what I found is that people will often shrink down big dreams to the size of their inner image. That actually is the limitation. It's like water. We see large bodies of water that are oceans, but yet we have small faucets to turn on the water in the sink. What's the difference? Well, the only limiter is the faucet is the small little avenue that thing can come through, the water can come through. And so, what my dad had to do is he had to go to Joshua chapter 1 and that verse that said, "Everywhere the sole of your foot shall tread upon, that have I given you." So what I've learned is that God will never give you a dream without giving you a word, without giving you something to stand on. Because if your image isn't at the place that it can accept the big dream, then you can either do one of two things. You could either disregard the big dream and keep living in normalcy, or you can grow your inner image by God's word to the capacity and the size that's necessary to be able to receive his dream and watch the miraculous take place in your life. And that's what happened
I'm
with us.
floored. I'm floored. I'm floored. I, yeah, that's good.
Yeah. Because it's going to take a
I
miracle,
am
right?
oh, a miracle and then some. A miracle and then some. I mean, again, look at all of the giants that are in the land,
Hmm.
right? You have these giants, and I'm just one guy.
Hmm.
And I'm just like, I don't have a crazy following. It's okay. Like,
Hmm.
it's okay. It's not crazy. And here I am thinking that I can reach out to pastors of influence and say, hey, God wants me to centralize the message of the gospel and the content that we produce so that a generation doesn't have to get caught up in the algorithms of Instagram and TikTok and YouTube. They can come to one central place and hear an array of voices that can communicate the gospel that they can receive from different styles,
Hmm.
and and centralize it for our generation, because our parents had it, our grandparents had it.
Yep.
We
Yep.
don't. We don't
Yep.
have it.
Yep.
Uh, and the ones that we did have are they don't even suit us anymore.
Yeah.
And it's like, who am I to think that these guys even need me? Like, they don't. Like, in reality,
Yeah.
nobody needs me and what I have to offer. They don't need it. They can get it done themselves.
Yeah.
And so it's going to take a miracle. And for it's almost a Mary and Elizabeth situation where I'm going to have to come in the room and say something, and their baby is going to have to leap and be like, no, that's actually what this generation needs. It's not that I
Yes.
need you, it's that the
Yes.
generation needs us.
Yes.
And I actually told one pastor, I've told maybe a couple pastors about it, but the first pastor I told about it is a friend of mine in Baltimore. And when I told him, the very first words out of his mouth was, Kels, that's crazy. It's like, that's absolutely insane. And then follows it up with, but there's nobody else that I believe can get it done but you. I
Yeah.
said, what?
Man.
Like, it just doesn't make sense. And so your book is for people like me.
Mm.
This podcast that I thought was just going to be a podcast, and God is quickly like, if you limit this thing to just being some little podcast, I'm gonna punch you in the face. Like, but I said I say it's a place for leaders, dreamers, innovators, and world changers. Or the sentence is it's for leaders who dream, dreamers who innovate, and innovators who change the world.
Mm.
And I feel like this book is giving language and framing to the things that God has been shoulder tapping some of us to prepare to get ready to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I, I I think you're right on. And Kels, here's one thing: if I haven't learned anything, which I've learned a lot of stuff, but if I hadn't learned anything from Bill Winston, I've learned this: that it doesn't make sense; it makes faith.
That is one of my signature sayings. And I didn't even know your dad said that. That's confirmation.
He- he-
I always tell my wife, if it doesn't make sense, that means it's about to make faith. That's crazy.
and that's it. And I want to go back to something you said because it stirred me because I have something written in the book about it.
Hmm.
Oftentimes, when we're presented with a big dream and we know we have to bring it before people, whether now or sometime in the future, we're tempted to think that, but they don't really need this. Like, who am I? Like, maybe I don't have a big following. I don't have good connections. I don't have the resources. Maybe I don't have the look or the sound or whatever. Who am I? And, I look at our smartphone, right? So look at your Android, your iPhone, and I think, as I just look at it, black screen, and I think, nobody knew they needed this in 1988.
That's a
Nobody knew
fact.
they needed it. Nobody knew they needed it in 1950. Nobody even knew they needed it in 1995. But yet, if you had a time machine, people jump from 1985. Come on, Back to the Future. You jump from
Come on.
1985 to 2023, and you'd say, what is this small little electronic device that everybody has on their hand all the time? What
Wow.
I've been convinced of is this, and it's a smartphone. I've been convinced of this truth. People don't really know what they need until you are sent with what they need.
Gosh.
They don't know what they need. People do not know what they need. We didn't know we needed Uber. We didn't know we needed social media. We didn't know we needed smartphones. We don't know what we need until somebody comes along with something that is so innovative and divinely creative that it solicits the need for it to the point where people cannot live without it.
Wow.
And that's us. That's the gift and the dreams that we carry, that there is a built in audience for it. But here's the trick: the audience will never surface if you never present it. So you have to present it for the audience to be able to appear. But we want the audience to show up first so we can give them the thing that is in our heads and in our hearts. But that's not how it happens. As we present it, it resonates so heavily that people, not only do they want it,
Oh.
they actually become a forerunner for it and will sell it to
Oh.
others. Even as you're asking them, like, why do y'all care so much? Why do you like this so much? Like, I'm good, but I'm not that good. I'm not that smart. I'm not that talented. Like, my voice is kind of crackly. Like, but there's just something about the authentic expression of your gift through the obedience of God, to just solicit a response that it resonates, I think, on a supernatural level.
Wow. Thank you for that. I
Yeah.
appreciate that.
So we
I
need that.
appreciate that.
Which
Wow.
you got, we need. And 7 years from now,
Wow.
we'll say, how did we ever live without it?
Good God. Selah. Okay. I want to end this with a couple of fun questions. Um, and you're actually, if I'm not mistaken, I think you're actually my first like official guest of the podcast. So thank you so
Oh,
much for coming on. I'm going to look back on this day and be like, you gonna show up to the sound stage and be like, remember when?
well, I am honored. Thank you, sir.
Man, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I think this was God divine, and I'm grateful. What better way to start this thing off than from a legacy of faith? Because that's what's really going to take to get this thing off the ground. And so I wanna end it with some three lighthearted questions. But I believe these three questions actually reveal who you are as a person. And once people analyze your answers, you'll be like, oh, that's how they think, that's how they process. So they're lighthearted, but I feel like they got some breadcrumbs in it. Okay.
Okay.
Question number one: what's one place you'd love to live in other than the city or state you currently live in?
Ooh. Okay. I think it would have to be somewhere warm with a beach. Um, it's got to be somewhere warm with the beach. Maybe Florida.
Okay.
Miami's a little fast paced for me, so maybe it would be somewhere like a Fort Myers or something like that.
Okay. West Palm.
Yeah, just something with nice weather, always warm. I love the sun. I love
Yeah.
sunny days. I love getting out in the sun. Uh, Ironically, I don't like to go to the beach that much, but I think I like the sun and the warm tropical weather. And so I
Yeah.
think somewhere that's tropical would be ideal for me. My
Okay.
wife would love it too.
Okay. Is there a particular like dream place you would go?
Dream place.
Maybe even out of the country. Like, if I could
Oh,
live
okay.
here, this would be crazy.
Hmm. I think it would be I think it would be awesome to live in the Bahamas. That would be really cool.
Mm.
We used to take
Oh
family,
yeah.
vacation trips, to the Bahamas, and so I've been there, probably half a dozen times or more, and, it would be awesome. I love the culture, laid back vibe.
Yeah.
It would be really cool to just be there.
I want to go to the Bahamas so bad. I want to go to the Miles Monroe uh,
But yeah,
situation that they have over there. Okay,
yeah.
question number 2. Who would you invite if you could invite 3 people to dinner, living or dead? Who would you invite to dinner?
Mm, gotta invite Jesus. I gotta
Of
rock with him.
course.
So I would invite Jesus. Um, I think I would also invite somebody like a historical black figure, whether it be like
Yeah.
a Dr. Martin Luther King or even somebody who lived even prior generations to him, um, to get real insight on how things were. And then,
Mm.
hmm, I don't know. I think the next one would be a billionaire of some capacity. Not saying it
Mm.
would have to be a Elon Musk or somebody, but
Yeah.
perhaps him. But a billionaire who has created something from the ground up because the way they think is just different. They just think
Yeah.
different, and I would
Yeah.
love to pick their brain about just all kinds of topics.
That's amazing. I would definitely invite Jesus. I would definitely invite a black figure. I think we're aligned in those. I actually think I probably need to expand this conversation, this question to 4 people
Yeah. Oh, Booker T.
because
Washington. I think that's who I'd invite for my
ooh,
historical black figure. Booker T. Washington.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think I would expand it to 4 people,
Okay.
and this is just me thinking live because I think that there's something to say with you invite Jesus, you invite a historical black figure, and you invite a billionaire who built something, but there's somebody that's missing from the table. And I would invite one young person to sit in the room
Hmm. Yeah.
because
Yeah.
putting them in those kinds of environments changes them and it
Yeah.
unlocks something in them and they need to hear the information that would go on in that room. And
Yeah.
I think a part of my assignment is to create the table to start inviting young people to sit at and just listen.
That's
You're
good.
in a season of just listening, and we're going to invite these major people to the table. And if you soak this up, it will revolutionize your life.
That's good,
So
Kels.
we just decided it's 4 people. um, last one, and we're done. Do you have a word for the year?
Word for the
Your
year. Yes,
personal
I do.
word? Yeah. Okay.
The word that God gave me at the beginning of the year, maybe even at the end of last year, thrive. That's
Mm.
that's the word
Yep.
that
Yep.
and God spoke that word to me. This is your year to thrive. And actually I'll say it because as God gave it to me, I wanted to, look it up and see what it meant. And it means flourish, prosper. It means to prosper by industry, economy, and good management of property, to increase in goods and estate, to prosper in any business, to have increase or success. So thrive is my
Wow.
word.
Awesome. I love it, man. Well, listen, guys, this has been a life-changing conversation. Thank you, um, Pastor Bill. Not Bill, Lord, you look so much like your dad.
I look kind of like him,
I,
a little bit more light
I,
skinned.
s- I just looked at you and I just saw so much wisdom uh, coming off of you. David Winston, thank you so much, my friend. I appreciate you for coming on, and I'm looking forward to the future. And guys, when this book comes out, when does the book come out?
February 21st.
February 21st. I need y'all to go get this book. Matter of fact, you need to pre-order it right now. And he actually has a whole uh, explanation of why you need to pre-order books on his page. Can you tell everybody where to find you and how to pre-order your book before we get out of here?
Absolutely. You can go to davidswinston.com and you can go to davidswinston.com/authentic to learn more about the book. Book is available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, or wherever books are sold. And you can follow me on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I'm at David S. Winston. So I look forward to you reading this book and getting your life changed.
Perfect. And can they get it directly from you?
Yeah, you can get it directly from me as well. You can go to billwinston.org/books and you can order it directly from our ministry website.
Guys, let's do that first. Let's patronize them directly, and then if you need to go another route because we bought them all out, then go another route. But let's go directly to them first, and let's be a blessing to the Winston legacy. And I can't wait to see what God does through it. Awesome, guys. Thank you so much for joining the podcast today.
Thank you so much, Kels. I appreciate it. Bless you, brother.
Yes, sir. Man, that conversation was rich. Man, I thank you so much, Pastor David, for your incredible wisdom and knowledge and your encouraging words. It's truly been a life-changing conversation for me, and I hope that somebody else watching this conversation has something in them that is just sparked with enthusiasm to figure out who God created you to be, what your authentic voice is, and the value that you bring to the table. Hey, once again, I need you guys to go and patronize our friends at mindjournal.com. Type in River 10 at the checkout in the discount section to receive your 10% discount off of anything in the store. Listen, if you were blessed by this conversation, do me a couple of favors. Number one, would you like the video? Number two, would you share it with somebody? Number three, would you drop a comment down below on your favorite part of this conversation? Also, if you're somebody that just says, I want to partner with you guys and sow into what you're doing at River Network, there are a couple of ways you can do that. We have Cash App at $ in the river. And we also have Stripe, and you can click the link down below in the description section, or you can head over to the link in my Instagram bio, click the Give tab, and you can give there. And we even have PayPal, which is kels@rivernetwork.tv. Man, we have so many ways for you to partner with us, and we are believing that God is going to do some incredible things with your seed in this soil. And we are just excited about what God is doing here beyond the shore. If you are not busy, last announcement, tomorrow night, I will be live with Pastor Sherman, Apostle Sherman Dumas, for just a moment of prayer and intercession. And I cannot wait for you guys to be a part of that. So if you can, make time to be on live with us. And it's going to be a great one. It's going to be an amazing year. And this has been Beyond the Shore. We will see you soon. Peace.